Don't.
Good morning, everyone. Let's take our seats and start. The sitting is open. In relation to the decision by several committees to enter interinstitutional negotiations pursuant to Rule 72, paragraph 1, announced at the opening of the session on Monday, the 19th of January, I have received no request for a vote in Parliament by members or political groups reaching at least the medium threshold. The committees may therefore start negotiations. The next item on the agenda is the joint debate concerning the European Council meeting. First, we have European Council and Commission statements, conclusions of the European Council meeting of the 18th of December 2025, and European Council and Commission statements, a stronger and more sovereign Europe amid rising geopolitical tensions and continuous threat to the rules-based order. We will start with the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, to take the floor. Antonio, go ahead.
Madam President Metsola, Madam President von der Leyen, honourable members, me gustaría empezar.
I would like to start by expressing my most sincere condolences with the victims of the railway accidents that have taken place in Spain over the past few days. All my support goes out to their families and loved ones.
Having today in this House could not be more timely. Let's face it, taken together, the geopolitical challenges Europe is facing sometimes seems daunting. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, the international rules-based order being undermined, core alliances being questioned. But the European Union will come out of this stronger, more resilient and more sovereign. For this to happen, our response must have three components: a Europe of principles, a Europe of protection, and a Europe of prosperity. All these three dimensions are being tested in the current moment of transatlantic relations. That is the reason why I decided to convene a meeting of the European leaders for tomorrow about transatlantic relations. Having listened to Member States in the run-up to this meeting, I believe a few fundamental elements are broadly shared. First, we are united around the principles of international law, territorial integrity, and national sovereignty. Second, we are united in full support and solidarity with the Kingdom of Denmark and with Greenland. Only they, Denmark and Greenland, can decide on their future. Third, we recognize that there is a shared transatlantic interest in peace and security in the Arctic, notably working through NATO. Fourth, further tariffs would undermine transatlantic relations and are incompatible with the EU-US agreement. Fifth, we stand ready to defend ourselves, our member states, our citizens, our companies against any form of coercion. And the European Union has the power and the tools to do so. Sixth, we want to continue engaging constructively with the United States, of course, on all issues of common interest, and there are many, since we are partners and allies and share a transatlantic community. I believe these are the principles that should guide the discussions between our leaders tomorrow and our actions going forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the first way to Europe to become stronger and more sovereign is to remain a firm champion of the international rules-based order, international law and multilateralism. we will always uphold the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter and defend human dignity and individual freedoms. We cannot accept that the law of the strongest prevails over the rights of the weakest, because international rules are not optional. An alliance cannot just boil down to a sequence of transactions. We cannot accept violations of international law anywhere, whether in Ukraine, Greenland, Latin America, Africa, or in Gaza. We cannot accept violations of human rights, whether in Iran, in Sudan, or in Afghanistan. In times like these, principles matter more than ever, because reliability is strength and consistency are key. The second way for Europe to become stronger and more sovereign is by better protecting our citizens. In 2025, we focused on the priority of Europe of defence and of accelerating our work towards European defence readiness. We have built the main building blocks. We are now working tirelessly to deliver, to invest better, coordinate more, improve efficiency, strengthen our European defence industry, and deploy new financial instruments. But long-term security in Europe cannot be upheld through increased investment and cooperation in defence alone. It must be achieved through a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, because Ukraine's security is Europe's security. Our response has been clear since the first day of Russia's war of aggression: to provide full support to Ukraine, financially, in terms of security, for reconstruction, and on its path to the European Union membership. At the last December European Council, recalling the commitment made in October to address Ukraine's urgent financial needs for 2026-2027, leaders took two historic decisions. First, we approved a 90 billion common European loan, backed by the European Union budget, to cover Ukraine's financial needs over the next 2 years. Second, Ukraine will begin repaying this loan only once Russia pays reparations, and until that time, the Union reserves the right to make use of immobilized Russian assets to ensure repayment. So, on Ukraine, we committed and we delivered, because in times of crisis, the European Union steps up, assumes its responsibilities, and acts decisively. Ladies and gentlemen, the third way for Europe to become stronger and more sovereign is to prosper economically. Just as leaders provided strong momentum to the Europe of defence in 2025, we must do the same for Europe's economy this year, 2026, working hand in hand with the Commission and the European Parliament to give a new impetus to Europe's economic growth, innovation and resilience. We must deliver for our citizens on quality jobs, wages and housing affordability, because social cohesion and prosperity are two sides of the same coin. On their own, neither would be sustainable. That is why, on the 12th of February, I will convene a strategic brainstorming session of European leaders to discuss how best to harness the full potential of Europe's single market in the new geoeconomic context. The European Union is a powerful single market. We need to deepen it, to complete it. How? By making it easier to bring businesses, services and investments across borders, by reducing red tape at all levels while maintaining our policy ambitions, by combining affordable, secure and sustainable energy sources in a truly integrated European energy market, by strengthening our digital sovereignty, defending our standards and regulatory independence against tech oligarchs, while protecting our children from deregulated and unconstrained social media, by promoting a savings and investment union that channels savings into productive investments within the European Union, and through trade. Trade deals are global rule books. Tariffs are taxes on citizens and companies. The European Union has built the most extensive network of trade agreements covering 78 countries, and the Commission is making impressive progress in negotiation with countries like India, Australia, Thailand, Philippines and the United Arab Emirates, to name just few. Just last week, we signed the historic Mercosur Treaty, which will create the largest free trade zone in the world, a market of more than 700 million consumers in 31 countries. Its political and economic significance cannot be overstated, especially in the current context. This agreement is not only economic value, is a decisive geopolitical significance right this moment. This agreement sends a powerful message to the world. Instead of tariffs, the European Union offers partnerships. Instead of spheres of influence, we are creating spheres of shared prosperity. The signing of the Mercosur Agreement followed more than 2 decades of negotiations. During this time, all points of view, including those voiced in this House, were carefully listened to and acted upon. For example, last month, significant additional measures and safeguards were put in place. I now look forward to working with you on the next steps, for which the role of the Parliament is essential. Honourable members, my message today is clear. Only by combining principles, protection and prosperity can we make Europe more sovereign, more resilient and stronger. Together with the European Parliament and the European Commission, we will keep delivering for our citizens, for our collective strength and for Europe's place in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Costa, and now the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear Roberta, Mr. President, dear Antonio, honourable members. Let me start by conveying my deepest condolences to the families and friends of the train accident in Spain. Our thoughts are with them. Honourable members, since I stood last time here in this plenary, we have witnessed events that have shaken the world. From the nationwide protests and repression across Iran, to the seizing of shadow fleet tankers in the North Atlantic, from the volatile situation around the Arctic and Greenland, to the relentless bombing against Ukrainian civilians and infrastructure, from the tensions in the Middle East to the Indo-Pacific. All of this reflects a number of realities for Europe. The first is a confirmation that the shift in the international order is not only seismic, but it is permanent. And the sheer speed of change far outstrips anything we have seen in decades. We now live in a world defined by raw power, whether economic or military, technological or geopolitical. And while many of us may not like it, we must deal with the world as it is now. Which brings me to the second reality and imperative for Europe, and that is to speed up our push for independence. Whether in our economy or in our security, whether on technology or democracy, we have to be strong in shaping ourselves if we don't want to shape the world around us. In this increasingly lawless world, Europe needs its own levers of power, and we know them. A strong economy, a thriving single market, one that can do business in different markets and can compete all around the world, a strong innovation and technology capacity, united societies with high levels of education, talent and health systems, and above all, a real capacity to defend ourselves. This is what European independence is all about. It is not about anyone else. It is not driven by the recent event. It is about a need and an opportunity for us to build a stronger union. We are already moving in this direction, but the speed of change requires a new approach from Europe. We will need a departure from Europe's traditional caution, just like we did on energy, on recovering from the pandemic with Next Generation EU, or like we are doing now with defence, with SAFE, or on supporting Ukraine. The world is changing faster, so does our mindset. So our institutions, governments and society, all of us, must transform the ways in which we think and act. And allow me to touch on a number of points which I believe will be critical. It starts with security, and in particular the situation in the Arctic. Greenland is not just a territory in a key region of the world map and a land rich in critical raw materials, a strategic outpost on emerging global sea routes. It's all of these things. But above all, Greenland is home to a free and sovereign people. It is a nation with its sovereignty and its right to territorial integrity, and the future of Greenland is only for the Greenlanders to decide. Honourable members, we do agree with our American friends on the need to ensure the security of the Arctic region. And on this we are not only aligned, but we are working together, notably in the context of NATO. Finland, for example, is working with the United States on icebreakers, a key piece of equipment in the context of operations in the High North. Or take the recent Danish-led Arctic Light exercise a few months ago in the context of NATO. This was key to strengthening Allied readiness in the Arctic. So we are aligned, we are working together, we share the same strategic assessment on Arctic security, and this is why the threat of additional tariffs for security reasons is simply wrong. If we are now plunging into a dangerous downward spiral between allies, this would only embolden the very adversaries we are both so committed to keeping out of the strategic landscape. Later this week, leaders will meet to discuss our response at the European Council. We are at a crossroads. Europe prefers dialogue and solutions, but we are fully prepared to act, if necessary, with unity, urgency and determination. But beyond this, we need our own strategic approach. This is why we're working on a package to support Arctic security. The first pillar will be a massive European investment surge in Greenland, in particular to further support the local economy and infrastructure. This will build on what we have already done. 2 years ago, before this all happened, I was in Nuuk to open our first office there. And in the next European budget, we have already proposed to double our financial support to Greenland, but of course we must do more and do it faster. Second point, we will work with the United States and all partners on wider Arctic security. In particular, I believe we should use our defence spending surge on Arctic-ready equipment and strengthen our security arrangement with partners such as the UK, Canada, Norway, Iceland and others. Finally, I believe Europe itself needs to reassess its wider security strategy. This should look at what is needed to adjust to today's new realities. Many of you have worked on various national and European security strategies, some of them in the recent past, but the world has changed so fast and Europe now has to change with it. Honourable members, when it comes to security, it is more important than ever that we keep focusing on Ukraine, because our European security and our European independence hinges on what happens next. It is now almost 4 years since Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. Peace talks are now ongoing, and we are recognizing the efforts the US is doing in this region. But while these efforts intensify, so does Russia's attacks. So Europe will continue to support Ukraine in every way, and this is why it was so important that in the last European Council we agreed to jointly raise 90 billion euros for Ukraine. Europe has taken clear responsibility for Ukraine's need, both civilian and military, and this 90 billion euros shows our unfaltering commitment and solidarity, and we will stand with Ukraine until there is a just and lasting peace. Honourable members, allow me to briefly turn to our economy and our need to reduce our dependencies here too, because this is intrinsically linked. Trade inside our single market accounts for 55% of our GDP. Trade with the rest of the world is worth roughly 45% of our GDP. 45%. Our supply chains and de-risking goals depend on trade. So trade matters more than ever. I just came back from Paraguay, where we signed a historic deal with Mercosur. Next week, we will be in India for another groundbreaking agreement. And negotiations are advancing with many others who want to do business with us. These deals will open massive opportunities for our businesses. They will create jobs here in Europe. They will give us resilience and security of supply, because the more trading partners we have worldwide, the more independent we are. And that is exactly what we need. If we take Mercosur, which I know is hotly debated in this House, the deal secures our access to raw materials our industry needs. And the benefits for European companies will be huge. Just take the automotive sector. European exports to Mercosur can rise by 20 billion euros or 200%. Or look at the chemicals or machineries, same effects. The deal with Mercosur will deliver huge gains also for producers of dairy, wine, spirits, oil, and much more. At the same time, we have listened carefully to your concerns and to our farmers, and we have secured strong safeguards for our sensitive agri-food sectors. I believe this is a deal that will bring benefits across our economy and across every member state. So to conclude, honourable members, this moment of global change is fraught with dangers. And Europe must be ready to change even faster, to become more independent for its own future. This will not be easy. It will require difficult decisions. And it will require to frame all of our work in the bigger picture. But I'm deeply convinced that together we can achieve it. Thank you very much, and long live Europe.
Thank you very much, President von der Leyen. And now we will have the first round of political group speakers, starting with the President of the EPP Group, Manfred Weber.
Madam President of the European Parliament, Commission, Council President, dear colleagues, beginning of 26, and people observing what is going on in politics on geopolitical level, when they listen to media, a lot of Europeans are concerned, or probably even scared. We are living in a crazy world, and basic questions are back. Basic questions have to be answered. And the first basic question, I would say, is on the table: what do we stand for? Freedom, democracy. In Iran, a regime, a sponsor of terrorism, a murder of its own youth. We need actions there, dear colleagues. The Revolutionary Guard must be named what it is, and that is a terror organization. Venezuela. I met last Thursday in Madrid El Mundo González, the president-elect from Venezuela. Even in his family, he has people who were captured, who are in prison because of their engagement for a democratic Venezuela. This House, European Parliament, nominated the democratic opposition in Venezuela for the Sakharov Prize. Maduro is now out. A dictator is out. That is good news. We look for a democratic future for Venezuela. And then, freedom, democracy. You know, we discussed this week about Davos, about Greenland. The tragedy of this week is that I had hoped that we can speak this week about peace in Ukraine. That was my wish. Now it's overshadowed by thousands of other issues. I just want to underline that we do not forget what is happening there. And we stand on the side of the brave people in Ukraine, on the soldiers who are defending our values there. I want to thank Ursula von der Leyen for her efforts to work on the 20 points plan. We are ready today for peace. We are ready for diplomacy. We are ready for a compromise. But Putin is continuing to attack the energy infrastructure. He's killing civilians. He's a war criminal. And only Putin is not ready for peace. And I would love to see also the friends of Putin here in this House, who are regularly talking with them, to engage, to convince Putin to come back to a consent and to a common understanding. The good news is that we have finalized now the 90 billion, thanks to the Council, and also the Parliament is ready to speed up. The second basic question what we have to do is consider is, who are our partners? The US President wants to see the US flag in territory of Greenland. That's a shock, frankly speaking. That's unacceptable. We defend Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark, the integrity, territorial integrity. And who plays with Greenland plays with NATO. And again, my question is, where are the MAGA friends? When Roberta Metsola at the beginning of the plenary this week underlined the support for Greenland and the support for Denmark, I saw that from the Patriots, half of the Patriots group stood up and defended the territorial integrity of Denmark, and half of the team kept seated and was obviously on the side of Washington. So the Patriots have to decide whether they want to be real Europeans or they are a colony of Washington. That's at stake. That's at stake in this moment of time. So what we need is a European answer. We see the increased pressure now from the United States threatening us with tariffs. We as EPP are clear, enough is enough. The reliability of Washington is in this moment of time at stake. I was one of the few, the EPP group was one of the few who said, welcome to the Scotland agreement last summer. Everybody criticized this. I said, it's a good deal. But what is now at stake is, can we trust in the compromises we did in Scotland last summer? The reliability is at stake. So for us as EPP, and I think for all parliamentarians, it's clear there will be no ratification, no 0% tariffs access to the European Union for US products until we have clarified the question of reliability. And when we speak about partners, we have to say yes to Mercosur. We are not a military power, but we are an economic power, a huge market. And when even Lula and Milei can agree on the idea that together we are stronger as Europeans and South Americans, then I think everybody must understand what is at stake. So if you say no to Mercosur, Putin will be happy, Xi will be happy, and also Donald Trump will be happy, with different arguments in mind. That's why yes to Mercosur means yes to have good friends, yes to strengthen the European Union. And the third point I want to make is, dear friends, seriously, everybody recognizes we are living in a new world. And the key question is now, are we ready? Are we fit for the purpose? Is the architecture of the European Union ready? And the state of play is, dear friends, the Council can be vetoed by Viktor Orban. We have the E3 now presenting themselves, but I said it several times, E3 is not Europe. We have national responsibility on defence. That means in this moment of time quite a weak Europe. And yesterday Lavrov said in his press conference, US can have Greenland and I take Ukraine and then things are solved. That's a reality. And dear friends, are we ready? And I have to say, no, we are not ready. Imagine for a second we would have really one voice where unanimity is gone. Imagine for a second we would be in a situation that we are coming back to the founding fathers of the European Union, building up a true defence union in the European Union. Dear friends, we have to stop to discuss the actual tweet and we have to begin to discuss making Europe strong again. That is what is at stake. And populism can only be answered if we solve the problem of the citizens on economy, on migration, but also the real point is to show leadership. So that's why we have a huge responsibility. Let's reassure freedom and democracy. Let's find new partners in the world and let's make Europe ready for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weber. And now the President of the S&D Group, Irache Garcia Perez. Go ahead.
Gracias. Thank you, President. I should like also to begin, of course, by thanking President Costa and President von der Leyen for their words of solidarity with the Spanish people. I, of course, fully endorse them in sending support and condolences to the families and the loved ones that have been affected by the train incident of the recent days. 1 year ago, Donald Trump returned to power, and with him a dangerous idea, that the international order is a nuisance, and that the law of the mightiest can replace the rule of law. Tariffs of 25% against European allies, open threats, economic blackmail, and contempt for the sovereignty of others. Trump is not an aberration, a passing anomaly. He is a direct assault on the world Europe helped to build. In the face of his imperial ambitions, Europe cannot hesitate. It cannot hide. It cannot stand silent. For Trump only understands the language of power, and Europe has economic, commercial, and political power. The question really is, are we willing to use it? On tariffs and threats to Greenland, the response must be immediate and firm. Suspend negotiations on the trade agreement with the United States, activate the anti-coercion instrument, and strengthen military presence in Greenland. And urgently prepare a plan so that the European Union will be ready to respond if Denmark were to invoke the mutual assistance clause under Article 42.7 of the treaty. Madam von der Leyen, Greenland is not simply a NATO issue. It is also the responsibility of the European Union. And therefore, we must take it on and not look the other way. The same for Latin America. Generic statements are not enough. We must speak clearly. Trump's aggression against Venezuela and his threats of force against countries like Colombia, Cuba, Mexico, Panama, and Canada are unacceptable, and they are illegal. Europe cannot normalize them because America, it does not belong to Trump. It belongs to the peoples of the countries there. In Venezuela, Trump has made his goal clear. It is not democracy. It is oil. He proves this by dismissing the democratic opposition and announcing U.S. control over Venezuela's oil industry. That is his only interest. Therefore, our position must be clear. We must condemn the violation of international law while actively engaging to facilitate a veritable democratic transition. Madam von der Leyen, I cautioned you during the December plenary, and today this has been confirmed. The policy of appeasement and complacency towards Trump does not work. When you do not respond in time to the problems only worsen. How many more provocations will be needed for you to react? And allow me to be clear on Gaza. Trump's so-called peace board is not a peace project. It is a business serving his cronies. If we truly want peace, Gaza must be governed by the Palestinian Authority and not by a council dividing power and influence. And, Mr. Weber, time has proven you wrong. You accused us of breaking the pro-European coalition by opposing the infamous trade deal with Trump. Today, we find ourselves in this solution. But it's not too late to come to the right side. And we should work in united way to defend Ukraine because it was working for Europe. And again, we must work for this unity to defend the sovereignty of Europe. When it comes to the Monroe Doctrine, against this, the European Union must respond with greater sovereignty in defense, energy, technology, and trade. This context should not paralyze us. It should push us forward, including through strategic alliances like the agreement with Mercosur and building a majority as quickly as possible in the European Parliament. Because our goal must be this, to transform any crisis into an opportunity to strengthen Europe. And in the stead of Europe of silence, submission, and fear, we will build a sovereign Europe of courage, democracy, and dignity. A Europe that does not kneel, that does not stay silent, a Europe that knows how to defend its place in the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to the chair of the PFP group, Jordan Bardella.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam President, President of the European Commission, President of Council, colleagues. Today, I will talk about our farmers, which you are putting to slaughter. Madam von der Leyen, you're just back from Paraguay, where you struck another nail in the coffin of our farmers. You signed a trade agreement with the Mercosur countries. It is a profoundly unfair agreement which will open our markets to hundreds of thousands of tons of meat from markets that do not respect our health and environmental standards. And you know this very well. This betrayal of the rural world justifies hypocrisy. We know that we have angered farmers, even though there has been awareness that the blocking minority would not have enough power. President Macron and yourselves have always been in favour of this agreement. And in this hemicycle, MEPs have voted 13 times against Mercosur agreements. And we've seen the greatest level of opposition ever to this agreement. As we approach signature, President Macron and you yourself have tried to get us to swallow the bitter pill through a couple of provisions. The safeguard clause, which is temporary and insufficient, and the Mercosur countries themselves do not recognise it. Then we have the safeguarding of the CAP budget. We had an alleged 45 billion euros, and this is therefore not an extension as promised. So these are empty promises. And once again, Madam von der Leyen, you have sacrificed French farmers and favoured German industry. We continue to oppose the dismantling of our food sovereignty. Let us support farmers and enable them to live in dignity from their work and contribute to our sovereignty in an increasingly uncertain world. Agriculture should be taken out of free trade agreements. Economic patriotism should be assumed. Company standards should be simplified. And for our economies, we should have only one diktat. Produce, produce, produce. Thank you.
Floor to the co-chair of the ECR group, Nicola Procaccini.
Thank you, President. President von der Leyen, President Costa. The conclusions of the most recent European Council paint a very vivid picture. Europe is once and for all stepping out of its ideological bubble to confront the harshness of reality. On the issue of immigration, the agreement on safe third countries for returns is a victory for common sense. We are beginning to wrest control of immigration back from human traffickers and from the uncertainty of judicial interpretations. And we are putting it back where it belongs, i.e., within the realm of political responsibility. This demonstrates that when Europe stops preaching and begins acting with pragmatism, results come. Now, as pertains to Ukraine, the 90 billion loan was an act of responsibility. We will continue to support that people who have heroically resisted Russia's cowardly invasion for 4 years. We are not doing this just for the people of Ukraine. We are doing it for ourselves as well. Because were Russia to achieve its goals, all the people of Europe would be in danger. If any nation were free to simply take with force its neighbors, then peace would be at risk. Peace that settled on our continent after the devastating wars that our history books are full of. Now, I know what you are all thinking. What applies in the East must also apply in the West. And I would agree. Indeed, we as conservatives, however, will continue to uphold the unity of the West, not just as a geographic space, but as a civilization, with its flaws and contradictions, but also with its culture of freedom. And frankly, I do not believe that it is simply by wearing Top Gun aviator sunglasses we will earn more respect from the United States. We will only be able to earn that respect through our geographical strength, economic strength, competitiveness, and the sovereignty of raw materials and efficient and technologically advanced military defense. Our strength as Europeans lies in the transatlantic community. Only within that community will we remain masters of our own destiny. Thank you.
And now I give the floor to the chair of the Renew Europe Group, Valérie Ayer.
Madame la Présidente, Monsieur le Président, Madam President, President of the Council and Commission, colleagues. Let me begin by expressing my solidarity and support for the Iranians and the Israelis. We've seen the unheard of violence, massacres, killing. This is a regime that has to disappear, has to come down, but it's up to the people of Iran, without interference from outside, especially, American bombs. The EU's responsibility here is huge. We have to ensure that the guardians of the revolution are taken into account in terms of being unable to access funding, and they should be on the list of terrorist organizations. We have to take this choice because it's based on principles that we believe in, fundamental values, fundamental rights, and self-determination of peoples. Let me turn to our relations with the United States of America. Appeasement isn't working. We are now lucid, aware, and it's time for political courage. Europe has to stand up to Donald Trump's America, and we have the tools necessary, and we can use them. We announced that we are going to renew our agreements with the US. We need the anti-coercion instrument to be leveraged. This is something we specifically voted for situations like this one we're in today. So let us urgently take action. President, we can't just sell off our model of Europe, and our sovereignty must be respected. So the DSA and the DMA must be fully implemented. We will refuse any simplification. Now, in terms of the economy, we need to work on the dissuasion in terms of the Greenland troops. We need a European naval force to dissuade any possible threats in the Arctic. And we need to strengthen our economic and political links with Greenland. Let me just remind you that there's no doubt about the mutual assistance clause in place between Greenland and the European Union. We are worried. We're worried about what Trump might do. We're worried about his policies. We're concerned about the way we will respond. Let's be honest here. If we were to use our arsenal for dissuasion, this would have considerable consequences on our economy, and therefore what Europeans want us to do is to ensure that the rules are respected, because there's a lot at stake, and because we will not be the vassals of the US or any other foreign force. And our responsibility here is to not hesitate. It is to take action. Take a look at the way things are. Trump has been in office for a year, and what we see is a president of the US who wants to subjugate us, who wants to humiliate us, who wants to destroy Europe. And Mr. Bardella, I'm listening to you talking about, Greenland. Are you happy with that? Are you happy saying what you said today, whereas your group was among the first supporters of Donald Trump? Because you said, I quote, that a wind of freedom was blowing over our democracy with his election. So, Mr. Bardella, what are we talking about today? For 1 year, we've seen ridiculous situation in terms of human rights. Action taken against a former Commission of European Union, Commission President, and his desire to annex Greenland today. When are we going to actually do something? When are we going to react? What else do we need? For everyone here in this Parliament, and Madam President, Mr. President of Council, our heads of government, we can't afford to wait. Something has to be done, and something has to be decided at the Council, at the European Council tomorrow, because our credibility is at stake. Let's not be timid about this. This is a historic moment for the independence and autonomy of Europe.
Merci. Now the co-chair of the Greens Group, Terry Reintke.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Commission President, Mr. Council President, dear colleagues. Greenland is not for sale. The Greenlanders have made that abundantly clear. And Europe will defend an international rules-based order and stand by Greenland and Denmark. And colleagues, let's be honest, this is not yet another diplomatic dispute between the White House and the European Union. Trump wants to destroy the foundation on which we built peace and cooperation, freedom and democracy over the past decades, international law and international institutions. And why does he attack Europe and the European Union head-on in this? We are democracies, we are close economic partners, we are even NATO allies of the US. Because the EU can be a global force for democracy and rule of law if we can work together. Colleagues, we have a single market, a force of global strength. We have a social model which might need reforms, but delivers universal health care, mandatory rest days and workers' representation to our citizens. Because we have a European Court of Justice that stands firm even in difficult times. Trump does not attack us because he thinks we are weak and irrelevant. He attacks us and tries to destroy the European Union because we have the potential to be strong in this world. So colleagues, let us be strong. Let us use our tools in this crucial moment by not giving in to blackmail, by using the anti-coercion instrument, by becoming world leaders in green technology, by enforcing our digital rules also against the tech oligarchs in the US, by finally introducing a proper taxation on digital services so that these tech oligarchs can pay their fair share, by building a strong and independent European defence sector. It's true, Europe can no longer afford illusion. Against chaos, we defend a world order based on rules. Against egoism, we choose cooperation based on mutual respect. And it's true, it's not only Europe, it's Canada, it's Australia, it's South Korea, it's Japan, it's countries across the world that want to work together with us. And against brutality, dear colleagues, and brutality we can see every day on the news at this time, we stand united in the defence of our values. This, colleagues, is the European way, and this is the way that we have to defend right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now the co-chair of the Left Group, Manon Aubry.
Madame von der Leyen.
Madam von der Leyen, Mr. Costa, Donald Trump is redesigning our world order, and you are serving as his puppets. The president of the first power in the world is threatening European territory, working in the interests of an oligarchy, and more than ever constitutes a threat to peace and security. But, Madam von der Leyen, Mr. Costa, your responsibility here is enormous. You have systematically downplayed the dangers of Trump's policy. You have facilitated the expansion of his imperialist project, because it was you, Madam von der Leyen, who, all smiles, prepared to conclude a trade agreement last summer which would relegate the EU to subservience to the US, and we knew that Trump would not stop here. You promised wealth and stability. Today, he is renewing his trade war, and it is not through a free trade agreement with Mercosur that we will find salvation. This is an agreement you're trying to impose here through force, bowing to Trump, bowing to China. This is what the EU does best. Trump is humiliating us, and you are giving him the other cheek. In the face of these attacks, yes, Madam von der Leyen, Trump's imperialist ambitions over Greenland is only a mirror of the lack of action on the part of the EU. We are bowing to the law of the strongest. When the US attacked Venezuela and seized Nicolás Maduro, you applauded the aggressor instead of taking the side of international law. With your blessing, there is also threats against Iran. But I can tell you this, the revolt of the Iranian people repressed with bloodshed is not waiting for Trump. Abroad, just like in his home country, Donald Trump is not exercising democracy. You can see how ICE killed Renee Nicole Good. His only interest is power and capturing natural resources. It is curious, I have to say, to see how the far right and Jordan Bardella's group contorts itself to applaud Donald Trump. And then reacts to Donald Trump's attacks on Greenland. Jordan Bardella, can you recall the time when you said that you were firmly at the side of Donald Trump? Is he still your ally? Madam von der Leyen, you can continue to consider this country your friend, even though it has shown only hostility and threats to peace. Yes, it is a threat to peace. The US has withdrawn from no less than 31 UN organizations. He wants to privatize justice to favor those who have power. He attacks on every front, and you yourself, Madam von der Leyen, have contributed to this by refusing to sanction the State of Israel and rendering the EU complicit in the genocide of the Palestinian people. Madam von der Leyen, let us reject the idea that we are the 51st state of the European Union. It is time to stop acting as vassals and affirm our independence from the US. You are now aware of the risks that the US poses to stability in the world. Perhaps you should run for Secretary of State for Donald Trump and leave us to defend the interests of Europeans and peace.
In einer Welt, die sich geopolitisch
In a world that's constantly changing geopolitically, it is time for us to take a stand. The European Union's cohesion is being aggressed. We see more centralization, ignoring member states. Instead of focusing on protecting our external borders and looking into our internal market, we see that we have neglected so many issues, and Brussels is bogged down in ideologies and ignores what people really want, such as is the case in Bulgaria recently. Now, what we need to do is ensure that we are independent from the United States of America. We have to be sovereign. Our foreign policy must be ours. Now, the so-called conservatives are thought to be militarists and anti-American, but this dependence today that you have brought us to, this dependence on the USA, is being exploited. Now, take a look around and look at, you say that you're the defenders of sovereignty of Europe. There's a total contradiction here historically. We must grow up as Europe. Europe must just behave in an adult manner. It has to protect its own autonomy, and this will only happen if we have more respect for our sovereign nations here in Europe. But the pro-gender policies, the pro-migration policies that continue are really to the detriment of the values of Europe. We are standing up for a different way.
Alitsky, 1.5 minutes.
Szanowni Państwo.
Dear colleagues, in Poland we believe in freedom, democracy and security based on international law. Therefore, we believe that a strong Europe, a Europe with solidarity, this is the value that we need to enhance. Those who are undermining our community are basically playing into the hands of Putin, because it's Putin who is a threat to our international order, to our security. And he is very frank about it. Those who want to undermine Europe are basically working for him. That much is clear. We need partnership. Let us look into the transatlantic community. I'm the vice president of the EPP responsible for foreign policy, and I'd like to say one thing. Neither the member states, nor the parliament, nor any European will give in to the blackmail. Trump wants to enhance the security of Greenland. That's what he's saying. But the answer is clear. Yes, he can do it with the founding member state of NATO, Denmark. Together, we will be defending every square meter of our land against any aggressor, Russia or anyone else. This is how NATO works. That much is clear, and if someone is saying something to the contrary, then it begs the question about the efficiency of NATO. We need to be strong, and we need to speak with one voice. Orban is trying to weaken us, but we will resist. Orban will soon belong to the past. We cannot surrender. We cannot yield in. If someone is trying to undermine our unity, we need to resist.
1.5 minutes.
Dank u wel, voorzitter, collega's.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues.
Securiteit en eigenlijk het voortbestaan van onze Unie staan vandaag op het...
Our union is being attacked, and that is what is at stake. I think this has already been stated. a policy to follow Trump, to just swallow a bad trade agreement. I think that this should be an era of the past. Our workers, our future, our sovereignty cannot be threatened, and never again. We shouldn't look at ourselves as if we were smaller than we actually are. We are an economic superpower. We must use that power. So yes, Council, Commission, colleagues, please show leadership this week. Let us have a clear message, not just in reaction to Trump, but also towards our people. Let us activate the anti-coercion instrument. It is the best way for us to show the world that we can and will use our economic power. And yes, let us fight for our sovereignty. Let us have a broad partnership in the world with Canada, Indonesia, and via Mercosur and India. That is the response to Trump. It is the time for truth. Let us move from words to deeds.
Danke sehr, Frau Präsident, meine sehr geehrten.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't help but use a little bit of irony in view of the situation that we're in. You may remember the European Union for many years still not able to have have warm water here in Brussels and in Strasbourg in the plenary. Now, so what are we capable of? What kind of an example are we setting? What are we going to do? Are we going to send tanks of soldiers out with their EU flags and declare war on Putin and Trump at the same time? It's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous, and it is ridiculous. So I'd like you to just focus on what the real problems are. For example, outside Parliament here, since yesterday, we've had thousands of people, farmers, who weren't against any body or anything. They're just asking to be recognised, to be able to continue actually living and making a living. And we're worried about the Mercosur deal undermining that living. Mercosur hasn't even come into force yet, but we're already talking about India, for heaven's sake. This is the end of farming in Europe, the economy, the automotive industry, and this is something that is just weakening our force and power in Europe. But there are some reasonable voices to be heard, such as Viktor Orban, for example, Andrej Babiš, Mr. Fico. There are some voices that are in this right-wing alliance which are taking us forward along the right path. But, of course, we're not going to go ahead with self-destruction, which is what you all seem to be interested in.
Apologies, President. At the outset, I just welcome the statement by the President of the Council and the President of the Commission regarding the fact that we are determined to insist on international rules-based order, multilateralism and the UN Charter, and ensuring that Europe plays its part in being a reliable partner in that context and in that architecture. Reference has been made to Ukraine, and we have to ensure that we support Ukraine, both the European Union, NATO and its allies, to insist that the integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine is protected, and that means continual financial support, as was announced with the 90 billion common European loan for Ukraine. But if we are to be genuine about international rules-based order, it cannot be à la carte. We have to insist on international rules-based order in every conflict, in every aspect of life. And that means we have to insist on international rules-based order in Gaza as well. And we have to insist that Israel complies with international law when we are dealing with Gaza. President, I find it very hard to listen to people in this chamber, particularly from the far right, advocating for President Trump, When President Trump is using the wine producers in Italy and in France as leverage to beat us. When President Trump is using the car factory workers in Munich, in Slovakia and in other countries right across the European Union, when he's using their jobs as a battering ram to threaten us. It is incomprehensible that you could be supporting a President of the United States who wants to undermine everything we are trying to achieve in the European Union. And if you don't believe me, just go to President Trump's US national security strategy and scroll down to C, where he says promoting European greatness, and then takes a sledgehammer to everything that we stand for here in this European Union. It is quite shameful and hard to understand. So again I say, go back to your constituents, go back to your voters and tell them that it's your icon, it is your hero that are threatening their jobs.
Thank you. Next speaker, Diana Riba-Ejiner.
Gracias, President.
Thank you, President. Today, it has become clear that the globalisation that the European Union has submitted to has amounted to outsourcing the pillars of our sovereignty. We have outsourced our defence to the US, our electricity supply to Russia, and industrial production to China. This strategy has come at a very high cost. It has made us extremely vulnerable and dependent. Will we make the same mistake in outsourcing our food sovereignty to Mercosur? Europe does not need to add to these dependencies. It needs autonomy. And on the international level, this means understanding that alliances are built on trust and not on threats or blackmail. Let's start by acknowledging that transatlanticism is broken and that Europe is and should continue to be a sovereign project. If the Commission's only plan is to wait 3 years for Trump to vanish from the scene and for better times, perhaps we will have no Europe left to defend. Thank you.
Would you like to take a blue card question from João Olivier? Oliveira, sorry, not the French. Oliveira, sorry. João is correct.
Thank you, President, for the right pronunciation. Senhora Deputada.
Madam Ribeiro, you mentioned the cost that has had to be paid, given that we have dismantled production and dismantled food production. So the question I would like to ask you, based on these conclusions, is if you don't think that it is dramatic that there is no wording on the social and economic reality of everyday people, access to food, access to healthcare, and other difficulties that ordinary people face. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. As I said, we started this term talking about sovereignty, all of us here in this chamber, food sovereignty, industrial sovereignty, all of this. And a year and a half later, we, once again, finding us signing a contract such as the Mercosur Agreement, where we are selling off our sovereignty. COVID taught us an important lesson. We need to enhance our sovereignty significantly as European peoples, as Europe as a whole. And as I said, globalization has made us too dependent on external forces. We've seen that with Russia and electricity, China and industrialization, and our member states. It is time for more Europe and more sovereignty.
Speaker Mark Botenga.
Merci. Thank you, President. Mr. Costa, Madam Callas. Last year, the President of the European Commission, Madam von der Leyen, went to Washington and she took her orders. We saw her with her notes. How many weapons do we have to buy from the U.S.? Okay. How many automobiles do we need to buy? Okay. We all stood silently by while they directed us when they bombed 8 countries in 1 year, from the Middle East to Venezuela. And now Trump says that we need to annex Greenland, and the President of the Commission says, well, we are nonetheless aligned. The Stockholm Syndrome is very powerful. That is clear. it's clear that we're going to struggle to get out of it. The U.S. is honest to at least say that they are the biggest threat to peace in the world. Thanks for that clarity. What do we do then? The Americans are powerful, but not overly powerful in Asia, in South America, all over the world. The countries are sick of U.S. imperialism. Let's try to do what we can. Thank you.
Mr. President, colleagues, the freezing of the US-EU trade deal is not just a response to President Trump's tariff threats over Greenland. It's a wake-up call. For many of us in Europe, especially those of us who have always been pro-American, this latest episode with Greenland has crossed a line. It is painful. For years, there have always been voices in Europe resentful of America, but now, even those of us who deeply value the transatlantic alliance are losing trust. Sweden, for example, is making massive investments in our military, taking our NATO commitment seriously. We recognize that it is wrong to free ride on the American taxpayer. Yet today we find ourselves punished simply because we stand by Danish sovereignty over Greenland. I would like, as a conservative, to call upon Republicans in Congress. Let's find a way forward that respects each other's sovereignty and build us a future of mutual respect, not division. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Milan Uhrik.
Pani Leyenová, poviem vám to úplne.
Madam von der Leyen, I will say this plainly. You brought the European Union to a crash, but also we are the laughing stock of the world. Your Green Deal, which is destroying European industry, is not a point of pride, but it's really a point of laughter from all the world. The US is doing anything they want, and they are mopping the floor with us, and instead of cooperating with the East, you decided to support war, and instead of using Africa and its resources, you decided to bring Africa into Europe. It's all counter anything reasonable. Your progressive colleagues passed a resolution yesterday to support European democracy, to make sure that in European elections, 16-year-old children are allowed to vote, and that candidate lists are gender balanced, half of men, half of women. Well, I'm sure that when this decisive feminist response of Europe is seen by Trump and Putin, they will fall down to the floor, probably laughing, because this is what you are, a laughing stock.
Thomas Geisel.
Herr Präsident, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen! Der Krieg in der Ukraine.
Colleagues, President, the war in Ukraine has cost the lives of hundreds of thousands of people and destroyed large areas of the country. But it's now it's about to destroy Europe. If we want to end the war, if the US President wants to end the war, to get rich on natural resources of Ukraine, as promised to him by Zelensky, the EU is running up a debt in order to help Ukraine to buy weapons to the tune of about 60 billion euros. So the EU will be left to foot the bill, because any hope of Russian reparations is ridiculous wishful thinking. Once again, the winner is Donald Trump, since a lot of the money will end up in the US arms industry. And this is happening at a time when the American president is threatening EU member states and vilifying Europe as a continent in decline. Europe must focus now on itself. It's up to Europe to end a war on its own continent, to overcome the divisions in Europe and seek cooperation, once again, with a country that is the largest in size and population, largest country in Europe.
We are closing KHDI procedure because we have pretty many names there already now. So Siegfried Muresan would be the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, High Representative, dear colleagues. When the President of the United States of America says that he no longer feels an obligation to think purely of peace and that his own morality is the only thing that can stop him, then the world has changed. And this is the new reality. We shall not be naive. We shall not hope that things will stay as they used to be. We have to tell the truth to the people of Europe. And the only thing that matters right now is how we will act and what we will do. We need to be strong, and we need to be fast, and we need to be united. We should not be weak and hesitant and slow and divided. We shall tell people very clearly that things will not stay as they were. Hoping that things will stay as they were would be wrong, and hope is no strategy. We have to prioritize, we have to act fast. We have to prioritize security. Security has to become the top priority of the European Union. Food security, energy security, defense, cyber security, protecting our coastal areas, our border regions, that is essential, and security is also an essential component for our prosperity. We shall also open up to the world. We shall do more with countries that are ready to cooperate with us. The United Kingdom, Canada, and other countries around the world. We should cooperate more with them in terms of defense, in terms of research, in terms of innovation, and in terms of trade, because the European Union that has many allies around the world is a European Union that is strong. We have a big market to offer, we are rules-based, we are predictable, and we stand by our role. And we should not believe what the Eurosceptics are telling us. No, we are not weak, we are not divided, we are strong, and now is the time to be united, clear, and fast. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Bernd Lange. Floor is yours.
Herr Vorsitzender, Frau Außenbeauftragte.
Chairman, Mr. President Costa, President von der Leyen, colleagues. I come from the north of Germany. And we say that if you feel the wind of change, some people will look for safe harbour and others set sail. In view of today's situation in the world, there is no safe harbour. And we're not able to avoid the obstacles that we're facing. So, quite clearly, we really have to focus on defending our own interests, meaning, we're going to decide this afternoon with regard to the Scottish deal that we will not follow that deal because we don't know exactly how much security that will bring us or how since the US has now violated that agreement. Secondly, we do have, however, the option of tariffs on US products, which was developed last year. And it's time, as of February, for us to use that as a clear sign to our American friends that we will not be blackmailed. And the anti-coercion measures also must come into play, and naturally, we have to look into possible dialogue and then take measures. And that's why we have the legislation in the first place, so that we, can use these trade instruments. And it's time to start making steps towards that. We need to set sail, and we need to take things into our own hands and sail out for the future of Europe.
Please.
Thank you. Well, you can put your head in the sand, but the situation is clear. The Ukraine strategy conducted by Brussels has failed. You become fanatic, and all the crazier. You force the doctrine of war on us, and you finance the killings in Ukraine by billions. You do everything here in the European Parliament to stop the creation of peace in Ukraine. Already by now, you have poured 200 billion euros into financing the war and the killings, the massacres in Ukraine. And you have already decided to continue this, to add a further 32 billion euros. And you are celebrating yourself that you will add a further 90 billion euros to this war spending, another loan. But we would need that money here within the European Union. And you, in this past debate, enthusiastically spoke about international rule-based order.
and you have proved to be very sensitive towards sovereignty. Well, then let's just go back to the everyday operation of the European Union and implementing sovereignty. Stop attacking member states' sovereignty. Stop attacking Hungary's sovereignty. Stop immediately to blackmail member states with fines. Stop immediately, for example, punishing Hungarian university students by not letting them participate in Erasmus.
Bruno Gonçalves. You have a blue card from Bruno Gonçalves, 305. Please, floor is yours.
Caro deputado, I'll speak in Portuguese. O deputado faz aqui.
Now, here you made a speech on everything that you wanted to express and what the Europeans don't want to hear. My question would be, and I think it's extremely clear, the leader of your political group hasn't said anything in terms of condemning, not a single word of condemnation against the U.S. president's statements. You attack Europe, but you're not talking about outside threats. What do you believe about the Russian aggression of Ukraine and that Putin might, and what do you think about Trump's statements about the occupation of Greenland? Thank you.
You have a floor to Mr. Deutsch.
Dear colleague, I would like to respectfully signal something. Everybody should first put his or her own house in order. It is unacceptable that you are speaking about protecting sovereignty here in the European Parliament, and at the same time, for more than a decade, you are stepping on Hungarian sovereignty with your feet. You are illegally attacking the sovereignty of Hungarians continuously. You are continuously politically blackmailing my homeland. You are using political pressure. This is unacceptable.
You have a right to continue. So if Colleague Deutsch, so I didn't watch to Mr. Gonçalves. He would like to continue. It's according to the rules. So sorry, Nicola Ben. Please go ahead.
Well, I would have a further question. What do you think about the illegal invasion of Putin of Ukraine, and what do you think about Donald Trump's statements about Greenland? Thank you.
Dear colleague, the Patriot Group and the Hungarian national delegation within the Patriot Group, ever since February 2022, has been very determined in supporting Ukraine's right to defend itself. And we Hungarians have provided the biggest aid. We have received more than 1 million refugees. So please do not try to teach me lessons on the help that should be provided to Ukraine.
Next speaker, Nicolas Bay.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. At the last meeting of the European Council, they broached the subject of competitiveness. It is one of our greatest challenges. And the Council still does not take it seriously. Mario Draghi drew very serious diagnosis. It is worrying on the economic and technological level, and growth is suffering. So what can we do to give our businesses and economic players in general their competitiveness back? Well, the answer is simple. They need to be freed of the stifling regulatory environment. Instead, we continue to apply suicide regulation, the CBAM mechanism, for instance, which forces European importers of raw materials to pay for the emissions of foreign polluters. This will not free our European companies. We need sustainable decisions and not just temporary patches. We must go further and faster in order to receive sustainable efficiency and legal certainty. EU policy as a whole must change. If we want to face up to China and the US, we need to free businesses from useless standards and fight against unfair competition. The EU continues to sacrifice its economic power on the altar of ideology, while the rest of the world moves forward, either with or without it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, High Commissioner, President Costa, dear colleagues. In 2016, we were taken by surprise by Trump's actions, and we even smirked and laughed about his incompetence. 10 years on, and we are taken by surprise again, and this time the smirking and laughing is happening on the other side of the Atlantic. While we struggle to respond to Trump's threats and attacks, the US scoffs at our inability to act. As the US Treasury Scott Bessent yesterday formulated it, and I quote, "My guess is Europe's next move will be to form a working group." And the US is right to laugh at our weaknesses. Appeasement of Trump is clearly not working. Trump, like most authoritarian leaders, responds to strength. To be an equal partner, the EU needs to be stronger, more united. And I very much appreciated the speeches of President Costa and von der Leyen today. But something important is missing. With today's EU, Bessent is right. We desperately need a more federal Europe to really stand up against other powers in this world. The current structure is insufficient, and additional intergovernmental initiatives will not make Europe stronger. So, dear Member States, President Costa, walk the talk. Make Europe strong, as most of you are advocating. Let it speak with one European voice. Let it defend itself with one European army. And let's get rid of national vetoes. This House showed the way in our 2023 resolution. Now it's up to Council and the Commission to pick this up and to do so urgently. We cannot afford to wait. And if not all 27 member states are on board, let's move on with 26, 25 or even 24 if necessary. We simply have no time to waste. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Ioan Rareș Bogdan.
Excelențele voastre, Your Excellencies, unless Europe wakes up, we won't survive. What's more valuable than our family? Well, our friends. But can we quickly say who are the friends of Europe today? No, because we're alone. In every country there are protests against the decisions made in Brussels. Are they all ordered by Russia? Probably not. Let's face it, Brussels is ready to provide plenty of ammunition for failing to communicate properly. Manfred Weber once said that if fake news gets 1 million clicks and only 10,000 people see the contrary statement, then you have a structural problem. We have a saying in Romania, there's a price to be paid for being silly. Now, look at the farmers. They don't know about the standards that are included in the Mercosur agreement. They know nothing about the safeguards. They know nothing about the maximum quotas and the limits to imports in the EU. The farmers have not been properly informed. They don't have the basic information, and all they can do is to protest. The same situation happens in the case of our car manufacturing industry. The commissioners are silent. The whole Commission prefers defiance to information. I honestly believe that there are lots of farmers who don't have enough information, and that's because of the failure of the European Commission. If the farmers are manipulated, then come out in public, Mrs. von der Leyen, and speak plainly and speak the truth. How much would it cost to dismantle the lies of extremists? It might cost you your position and the public image of the Union. Unless we communicate efficiently, the extremists will take us down.
Garetti would be the next speaker.
Lo abbiamo sempre.
Now, we always knew this. They are afraid of the EU for its values and its unity. That is why they're threatening us, and we must save ourselves. But just via words, that will not be enough. We have to make a step forward in integration, investment in strategic autonomy, in energy, in the digital areas, innovation, in common EU defense. That means joint political will, social cohesion, dignity of individuals, so important for competitiveness. Now, we are experiencing the most dramatic period since the end of World War II because they want to take a good model and replace it with might makes right. We need justice, and the world needs a strong Europe to guarantee peace. Governance, therefore, must act united to take the path of a united and free Europe. We must be up to the task of history because the problem is not the EU but its enemies.
Next speaker, Willy Saundal.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in Danish. I Europa tror vi på alliancer og aftaler. Den dyrebare.
In Europe, we believe in alliances and agreements, and this has worked for us since the Second World War, the end of the Second World War. Trump thinks you can just do what he likes, take what he likes, and we believe in alliances. He doesn't. America first is what he wants and what he believes in, which will end up being America alone. Our model seems more attractive and appealing to us, and why, people want to join us is because of our economic success, rule of law, legal security and certainty. Nobody wants to join, go into Russia, for example, with them taking, steps against Ukraine. We need to resist and be resilient against this pressure from outside.
President, Ukraine, Venezuela, Iran, Greenland, and perhaps tomorrow Mexico, Canada, who knows, maybe even France or Spain. All of Trump's direct and indirect threats are a humiliation for Europe, and they are upending global geopolitical balances, our longstanding certainties, NATO, the UN, and even the EU. We're all facing an identity crisis and risk being swept away by powerful oligarchies that are more influential than any single head of government. George Orwell's prophecies coming true. A global elite is asserting control over all. The European Union stands at a crossroads. It must decide whether it will fight the modern form of authoritarianism or once again, 80 years after the end of World War II, stand up for democracy, freedom, and sovereignty. At the next Council meeting, I urge European leaders to rise to this challenge and prove when it comes to tariffs, etc., the heads of state and government must show that they are leaders, that we are not vassals. Take clear positions against Trump and his arrogance. Thank you.
Next speaker, Reinhold Lopatka.
Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, zu Beginn möchte ich festhalten.
First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to very clearly say that we would like to express full solidarity with the people of Greenland. There is no question of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of that country. The Greenlanders are the only people who can decide on their fate. The question is, when it comes to, Greenland, why are the patriots so silent when we're talking about the downward spiral not being countered by further tariffs on either sides of the Atlantic? The patriots are silent. This is the difference between the centre parties and the populist parties. When it really comes down to the nitty-gritty, they don't speak out, which is why we have to be united in Europe. We have to be decided, determined, aware, yes, ready, to enter into dialogue, but you can only have dialogue, successful dialogue, if both sides are prepared to enter into an open and candid discussion. Now, the internal market is something that we as Europeans in the European Union gives us huge leverage. But we need to take this momentum and fully implement our force as Europeans.
Colleague Lopatka, you have a blue card. From Alexander Sell. Would you take it? 612.
Where he is?
612 on the right side. Please, you can go ahead, colleague Sell.
Vielen Dank, Herr Lopatka, dass Sie die...
Thank you, Mr. Lopatka, for accepting my question. I'm surprised that you, coming from the EPP, are talking about sovereignty, because, you know, for the last 10 years, you have basically been responsible for things like the Green Deal, the law on value chains, everything that has really undermined our competitiveness and has actually undermined our sovereignty as Europeans as well. So that's why we're in the situation we're in. And that's why foreign powers are able to play with us, with their policies, with the policies that you were responsible for. We've always had a clear position in the EPP. We, of course, see the European Union as something that takes subsidiarity into account, but we need the European decisions when it comes to important issues. And we've shown that we want to strengthen our economic standards. There has been too much gold plating, that is true, but we didn't have the majority that we now have in the European Parliament, and we will use this to strengthen the economy of Europe. But we don't agree with Trump's increase in tariffs, and on which you, on your party, are totally silent.
Speaker Alex Ajus Saliba.
The best weapon that we can use in the face of bullies like Trump is to remain consistent. Consistent with the principles and values, European values. Consistent in how we act in face of threats. And therefore, the messages that we pushed forward as a European Union, as we faced these threats by the US government against the European digital acquis, we have taken action by means of the digital omnibus. This has shown that we fear these type of threats, and therefore it's important that we remain consistent, that we reinforce and enforce our legislation and in our political diplomacy, consistent by addressing fundamental crises that surround us, crisis in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza, and how we address other crises that surround us, like the Russian aggression in Ukraine and other geopolitical issues. In this way, the European Union can continue to act as a global leader to work in favor of stability. Thank you.
Colleague Grajulis, 525. 525, it's on the right side from you. Would you accept? Please, you can ask.
Europos Parlamento daugumos atstovas.
You are representing one of the majorities in the European Parliament. Don't you notice that you have made mistakes acting in the European Union? On December 18th, the European Council convened, and what decisions were taken? No decisions were taken. What decision was taken on the immobilization, on freeing Russian assets? Nothing. You are talking about Trump, but you should really recognize your mistakes and act resolutely.
I'm completely surprised that the far left and the political groups on the side of the Parliament continue to defend their idol, who's Trump. In front, when we face these threats threats not just on European legislation, but direct threat on one of our member states and their territorial integrity. I believe that if you really want to keep the name patriots, first and foremost, you need to remain rigorous in front of those who attack European interests. This is something that clearly you're not doing.
Jorge Busa Villalba.
Europe is weak and dependent out of its own doing because of the Green Pact, because we've opened the doors for mass migration, we've closed down nuclear power plants, and we've signed agreements with suppliers in the primary sector. We repeat that we're a rules-based order as a mantra, but this is no longer part of the international context. Sovereign governments are being pressured. We speak of equality, but Hungary is being ceaselessly audited. We speak of human rights, but we're allowing censorship online. We speak of the international order, but we have seen the violation of borders, unilateral action, and the recognition of political entities, and we pay the aggressors. Turkey has occupied part of Cyprus since 1974. Morocco is flaunting UN agreements and publicly retains illegitimate claims on Spanish territory such as Ceuta and Melilla, and they still have access to billions in European funds. Gibraltar in Spain is illegally occupied by the UK. Silence. Russia invaded Crimea, and silence. Because you were receiving cheap Russian gas so you could close down the nuclear plants. Obama promoted military intervention in Libya, Syria, Egypt, Yemen, and silence. What do we do when Druze minorities are being killed, or when we're feeding governments that are slaughtering Christians in Africa? We are complicit with drug trafficking and the famine on Cuba. Rules have always been the instrument of power.
Thank you. Next speaker, Jack Madison. Jack, you have a floor.
Thanks so much, dear colleagues. First of all, as the President of the Commission, Ms. von der Leyen, said that we need three things for the future of Europe: strong economy, united societies, and strong defence. But the problem, of course, with the economy is that we have been falling in the last 2 decades. Now the EU economy is about only 13% of the global economy. And why? Of course, because of the bureaucracy, over-regulations, and Green Deal, high energy prices because of the Green Deal, and so on. And when you look exactly on the numbers, if we are prioritizing also defence, from the EU budget, every year we are paying about 100 billion euros for the climate policy. But from the national budgets, especially when you look at Germany and France, the strongest economies, strongest countries by defence in Europe, like this year, the German taxpayers are paying just approximately 80 billion euros for the climate policy, but only 110 billion euros for defence. Same thing in France. 50 billion to the climate policy, just 50 billion to the defence. And then we are hearing the liberals who are saying that we are a strong Europe, but sorry, I will never trust the liberals, socialists here, who have screwed up the Europe, and now you can solve the problems, like Mr. Hayer from the radio France said, we have to protect democracy. But really? With you? No.
Colleague Madison, would you like to take a floor from Siegfried Fries? Colleague Madison, would you like to, I fully understand your internal speech with the High Representative, but would you take a blue card from Siegfried Fries from 139? Yes, please.
I think you're wrong if you think climate policies and security and defence policy differ that much. The solution is the same. Free ourselves from the Russian gas, and let's not be naive and think that we can just switch from Russian gas to American LNG. If we go your way, deciding to treat this as completely different topics, we are doomed to fail. We are doomed to replace just one dependency with another, and that will not create neither a stronger Europe or a safer Europe. Denmark, Renew Europe.
Okay, super. Yeah, it's fine. Well, if you would agree with me, everything will be wrong, because you're from Renew and I'm from the Conservatives, so it's fine. When we look at the climate policy, The question is that we need a reliable resources. Is it the nuclear plants, or is it like the gas, is it the LNG, whatever? Unfortunately, or even the Estonian economy can't run only by the sun and wind. That's a pure fact. We need a stable energy. But what Germany has done, because of the Greens, your partners here in the Parliament, they shut down all the nuclear plants, relying only on the Russian gas, and now they are screwed, of course, because of the Russia. Yeah, it makes sense. But the problem is that now you can't go with electric tanks to Greenland to say, democracy here, let's protect it.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. So, next speaker, Ludek Niedermayer.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues. The start of the year, unfortunately, reminded more Hollywood movies than the world we want to live in. It doesn't mean that challenges for us, both external and internal, are different. External challenges, I mean especially Ukraine, are even more pressing because, unfortunately, rhetoric of the White House very often is very close to something that wants Mr. Putin here. And that means that our call for clear and strong support for Ukraine is still the same. But I expect Council mostly to react on new challenges. I am talking about Greenland. I am talking about the tariffs. And I'm talking about the Peace Committee President wants to introduce. These are not isolated events. Everything fits together. It's good to listen to Mark Carney, great governor of the Central Bank and Prime Minister of Canada, and his speech in Davos. This is the world that we are in, and this is the world that he described using the words of Václav Havel. So that's why I called for the Council. Be clear and bold on support of Denmark and Greenland. Be united. Make Europe stronger. Partner with the countries like the country of Mr. Carney. We together need to build stronger Europe. Europe that is fit for the world of today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, Francisco Assis.
Muito obrigado, Senhora Vice-Presidente.
Thank you very much, Vice President of the Commission, President of the Council. Today we stand before a truly tragic situation. Our main ally, historically speaking, is becoming our adversary. There are clear reasons for this. There is an anomaly today in the United States of America. We have a democratically elected autocrat who is leading the world's biggest power. He's promoting this autocratic vision not just domestically, but abroad as well. This has become a disturbance of the international order, the very same international order that the US played a key part in creating. I'd recall the key role of President Wilson during the Paris Conference of 1920. Funnily enough, the leader of the far right spoke today and said nothing about Greenland, but spent his entire speaking time attacking the Europe-Mercosur trade agreement. And the two things are linked. A small Europe turned in on itself without ambition is exactly what we do not want. We want a Europe that is open to the world, that can act as a regulator of the international situation. I will conclude, and that is why the Mercosur agreement is essential.
Next speaker, Anna Cavazzini, for 1 minute, please.
Ja, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, Trump.
Ladies and gentlemen, Trump is using the tariffs to exert pressure on us. We're quite aware of this. But if the EU keeps giving in and is showing cooperation all the time, then he'll just want more and more. He'll come up with new tariffs just to get what he wants politically. We have to be aware of this very tricky situation. We're not weak in Europe. We can be strong. But this strength requires the member states above all, but the Commission as well. And to be honest, the EPP, which, has a lot of work to do. What we've always criticised in Greece as being something that's unequal, we must put it into play. If you just replace Russian gas by US gas, then we're just, replacing one evil by another. We need to use is what we've been preparing for months, but we haven't dared to set in motion. So let's not wait for new tariffs. Let's start using the measures that we have available, and the anti-coercion instrument must be implemented and activated. Hopefully on Thursday something will finally be done in the Council.
Colleagues, Europe is standing at a moment of decision. The threats are real and they are growing, week by week, day by day. Russia continues its brutal war against Ukraine, and Europe must stand firm. And we can no longer outsource our own security. We must take responsibility for our own defense. But colleagues, the military threats are only one side of the coin. The other side is the attack on our democracies. Disinformation, foreign interference, Russian troll factories and bot networks. Authoritarian regimes are investing massively to destabilize Europe, to weaken us from within. These operations are also made easier when Chinese and American digital tech giants fail to take responsibility. And let's be clear, they are actually providing the infrastructure, and this is a very dangerous cocktail. Today I present my report on a European democracy shield. I think it is time to make clear that Russian bots are not free speech. And we must protect our elections and build resilience in our societies against disinformation. Because defending Europe means defending both our borders and our democracies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Sarah Knafel.
Monsieur le President, colleagues, when 92% of our data is stored outside of Europe, when our digital infrastructure obeys U.S. laws, our hospitals, our businesses, they become vulnerable. And von der Leyen, in the meantime, what is the Commission doing? They are coming up with the regulations, standards, forms. We are regulating. And meanwhile, we see Rafales are being exported across the continent, and our ships are built and sold in the world over. We just need to make the decision to be able to use our strengths. Buying defense it shouldn't even be a question. Our armies cannot depend on foreign authorizations or updates blocked in Washington or spare parts that are rejected. Madam von der Leyen, the billions that you are announcing for defense, if it goes to the U.S., that's not sovereign. That is submission. Sovereignty is also food sovereignty. A continent that is producing more than it eats is giving up its freedom. Our farmers are reminding us this week with the Mercosur trade deal, we are asking for a continent that is consuming and not producing. The Europe that we want is one that produces, that invents, that decides, not the one that just chats and comes up with regulations and depends on the decisions of others. Thank you.
Paulo Cunha.
Vice President of the Commission, President of the Council, dear colleagues, Europe is living in a context of generalized threats, disrespect for sovereignty and self-determination of peoples, unusual trade relations, and intellectual dishonesty. This is the context in which we need to take on the real challenge of promoting internal cohesion. We have to show that we are able to be even more united and stronger through our union than we are alone. And this is why we should deepen the single market. That includes 450 million people in Europe. But we should also go in search of other markets, other trade opportunities, and the agreement with Mercosur is a good example of that. As our President of the European Commission said, reaching other markets and building other relations should also be a priority in trade, but we should not give up on our European values, respect for democracy, for individual and collective rights, for the rule of law, and above all, for the fundamental right of people. It is in this context that we should focus all our energy to ensure that we, as a European continent, stand ready to face the challenges and to ensure that the European way of life is the winning way globally.
Yeah, please.
Monsieur le Président, Madame Callas, Monsieur Costa, Madame Callas,
President, Mr. Costa, Callas, I have a specific question for you. I'm very concerned listening to Ursula von der Leyen talking about European affairs, but there's nothing about the digital, the payment system, the arms system, but that's our tragedy. Just about all our payment systems are American. Donald Trump can just cut these off overnight. He's done it before. He did it with the ICC to put pressure on our judges and the rule of law. The European Commission for 1 year hasn't stopped bringing us through urgent procedures. And I'm specifically asking the European Commission urgently to please organise a meeting in the coming weeks, next week even, to focus on the system of payments. We're talking about 10 million or so euros. I mean, everything else is just hot air. It's not like we weren't warned. Everybody's worried. The judges are worried. The traders are worried. That's all I'm asking you, and Mr. Costa too, so that we can make some headway. It doesn't cost us anything, but it's essential for our economy and our democracy. Mrs. Callas, can you answer me? Can you tell me yes? Can you please give me a positive answer to my question? Interruption from the chair, please. Assist.
Next speaker, Paolo Borchia.
Well, I listened carefully to President von der Leyen's statements on Mercosur specifically, and I was surprised when she talked about farmers that had been listened to, that had been heard. So my question is, if they have been heard, then why have they been demonstrating for 2 days now? How come they are losing jobs? Why are they sleeping outside of the parliament in temperatures that are below zero? This is a question of legalized unfair competition. We're talking about one of the sectors that is most under pressure by competition and also by standards that have been adopted by this parliament. Now, I realize that we cannot make everyone happy, not every sector happy, but what I want to know is why do we always ask farmers to be massacred everywhere and every time? And then, President Costa, you referred, sir, to the 90 billion loan for Ukraine. I would, if you allow, ask you for more realism. If we think we're going to get this money back without an international legal basis, freezing Russian assets and forgetting that there are European assets frozen in Russia, I think we are being disingenuous here. I beg your pardon, sir, but I'm glad that you're not at the head of a bank, because if you were in the head of a bank, I'd be very afraid to have my savings there.
Benedetta Scuderi, please, Madam Scuderi.
Grazie, Presidente. Thank you, President. Mr. Borchia, you're talking about Mercosur. Mercosur went through the Council because of the vote of Italy. But, Mr. Borchia, is the Lega not a part of the coalition in government in Italy, and that meant that the Mercosur agreement got through the Council? How do you come here to the Parliament and lament that decision when it's your government, your party, your Deputy Prime Minister voted for this agreement, and that meant that it got through? How can you now state that it damages farmers? Colleague, if you don't mind, this is a bit prosaic because we have been talking about this decision, and the position of the Lega has been well known for years. Moreover, governments, of course, that are democratic, that are not something that you particularly like, but they are held up by coalitions. In coalitions, there are parties with different positions, and the Lega has always been clear about its position on this. And in fact, yesterday, we stood next to the farmers. I'm not sure if you were there, but we were there and we spoke clearly.
Thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to Beata Szydło, please.
Thank you very much, President. First, we had this Green Deal, which destroyed the European economy. Now we lost the remnants of competitiveness that we had, and certain companies are moving abroad. And the German automotive industry made pressure on Ms. von der Leyen. This pressure has been put by the German automotive industry, and Ms. von der Leyen succumbed to this pressure and signed the Mercosur agreement. Now this deal means that the European industry will lose its competitiveness, but it will also lead to the disaster in the European agriculture. And the farmers are protesting outside because they feel that they feel threatened. And they are here to send a strong message to us, but not only to us, but also to the European Commission, because we are facing a major threat in terms of our sovereignty, which is now limited by the signing of this agreement. What is the reason for all of it? There is always the reason is the interest of a one single member state, and the Mercosur is a major mistake, as the Green Deal before, but also the dependence on the supplies of the Russian gas.
Brutal force of a world which has never been so dangerous. The noise of the times today bring to the surface confusion and increasingly fear among our citizens. And the first response to this must be absolute unity of Europe, irrespectively of political differences here in the European Parliament, of national differences, in our response to everything that is testing our unity today. With a little bit more respect and with a little bit stronger stance, because the threats are not something that we can accept as human beings, as nations, as a civilization, particularly when they come from the direction of our allies. However, the reality of this new world cannot be ignored for much longer. It is up to us to adjust and adapt in a brave manner. Whether we want it or not, the new world is upon us, and we cannot continue to rely upon anybody else except our own forces, our own resources. In reality, this means that after 4 years of bloody imperialistic war in Ukraine, we must continue strengthening our defensive capacities, deepening our common market, slashing down all the regulatory costs, as well as expanding our free trade with the world, with Latin America, India, or Indonesia. Protecting Europe today does not mean preserving status quo. It does not mean protecting the ease of existence today. It means upholding our relevance, the Europe that believes in.
Will be Vice President Victor Negrescu.
President Costa, Commissioner, dear colleagues, quite a lot of people are worried. There's lots of uncertainties, there's lots of fatigue. The world is changing too fast. This is a time of real risks, of economic pressure, of many uncertainties. One thing emerged clearly from the Council: Europe needs to come up with stability, not statements but decisions. Jobs are important. Purchasing power is important. If you want to be strong, if you want to be united, for that, what's important is to have the trust of our citizens. Therefore, transparency and dialogue are absolutely necessary. Even if we're dealing with difficult topics, we need a united Europe, a forward-looking Europe, where no one is left behind, and a Europe that's not dependent on anyone else. We need to be a pillar in a changing world, and for that we need empathy, so citizens can truly support the difficult decisions that we need to take together.
Carlo Ciccoli.
La nuova Europa.
New Europe is an historic necessity. The 20th century wars have marginalized Europe, and balances have gone from our area to the other sides of the Pacific and Atlantic. The European Union is weak. 450 million people compared to 1.45 billion in India, 1.4 billion in China, 1.5 billion in Africa. The European Union would have a different bit of clout if it was the EU of 450 of the Western and 250 Russians that live as our neighbors. I think we need to rethink this, think it differently without thinking about the current governments that we have, this leader, that government, etc. Because I've listened to a lot of people who've been hostile to Trump, and there's something that is clear. He has broken the balances in the post-World War II period, and therefore there's a complete and utter shift.
Colleagues, Commissioner, Council, as Mark Carney said yesterday, the power of the less powerful begins with honesty. So, let's be honest. Donald Trump will not change. Waiting him out is not a policy, even less a strategy. It is cowardice. All the flattery, all the appeasement brought exactly nothing except a spectacular failure. First, the EU Commission President accepted humiliating tariffs to protect the rules by bending. Then the humiliation came at the Alaska summit. Then for Trump-Netanyahu's so-called peace, where we traded our moral stance for less than nothing. Good time to remember now when all of you are shocked for this bizarre and cynical board for peace proposal. Thierry Breton was denied a US visa but isn't the first one. ICC judges and UN Special Rapporteur are also being sanctioned as drug lords for only doing their jobs. When will it be enough to understand that the rule of international law is falling apart under the whims of a crazy narcissist, driven by the poisons of his own propaganda, which, by the way, many of you so-called patriots here openly admire and seek to replicate. To replicate what? Federal agents shooting people on the streets. Greenland must be the line in the sand to finally stand up. In all honesty, we are neither weak nor without power, just lacking the guts. That's a big difference. And while Washington is mocking us, deliver something real. Come on, hit back where it hurts. There's no other way with a bully like that. Call things what they are. Stop treating Trump as he was rational. Fight back based on our values and rules, not only when it's convenient, because to keep kneeling to an unstable egomaniac is not negotiating with a partner. It is obeying a madman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's good to see all of the colleagues again. President Costa, Vice President Kallas. I should now like to give the floor to Mr. Clausen.
I dag taler vi rigtig meget.
Today, we are talking a great deal about a Europe beholden to its principles. If we look around the world, that appears to be a bit of a joke, though, because we preach one thing and do the opposite, based on the conclusions of the last Council meeting, where we talked a great deal about how to support a peaceful transition in Syria. What we're seeing in Syria now, though, is anything but peaceful and including. We're seeing young Kurdish women being thrown from high buildings. We're seeing violent abuses, and we're seeing IS fighters. The EU's reaction has been limited to a few statements while they continue to finance the Syrian regime who are behind what's happening. Why are we so afraid to put our foot down and demand that this ceases? That is what we should be doing if we believe in our principles.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, please.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Meneer voorzitter van de Europese Raad, mevrouw.
Yes, thank you. High Representative, President of Council, ladies and gentlemen. Well, what is really at stake here is the question of using our strengths, economic constraints, intimidation is what we're facing. Anyone who thought this was just a passing phase, they were wrong. You remember we talk about democracy and being strong and mutual respect with the UK and the rule of law. It's got to be our strategy, and it's got to be the very basis for the G8 of democracy. Colleagues, the European Union really must take a role of leadership when we are talking about threats against one country. We should all react. Article 5 of NATO, but also economically speaking, it's not escalation. It's looking for an alternative. The question is, are we ready? Are we strong enough to put all this into action? Let's hope we are.
Mr. Shaheen, please.
Dear President Costa, dear colleagues, recent developments, including tensions over Greenland, remind us that Europe's freedom to choose its values, to produce and to trade is not guaranteed. Our dependencies can be weaponized and our sovereignty challenged. That is why I'm calling for a European freedom deal. Building on the clean industrial deal, this agenda is not just about climate or industry. It's about securing Europe's ability to act freely in an unstable world. Our industry must stand on their own, our supply chain resilient, and our energy clean, affordable and European. Let us turn our decarbonisation and security agenda into a freedom deal, safeguarding a Europe that is resilient, sovereign and free. But for that, we need a strong budget. With global instability and the need for autonomy, the question is, how will you, dear President, convince Member States to choose more and not less public investment? And how do you see the future of the Union's finances in the actual state of the world? Thank you very much.
Grazie, onorevole. Thank you very much. Mr. Stanek, please.
Vážená paní předsedající.
Madam President, Europe is currently experiencing increased geopolitical tension. However, our reaction is too often rhetorical and not strategic. The rules-based world order is what we support, but in the Security Council of the UN, the real influence of Europe is weakening. Next to Russia, China, and the US, Europe is frequently considered not a decisive partner, but a pundit on what is happening in the world. And we should be concerned about this, because those that do not have the strength to promote rules shouldn't be surprised if others cease to respect those rules. And in fact, Europe has frequently used this liberal rhetoric, preaching, teaching, and yet we are comfortable under the U.S. security umbrella. But that is not sovereign, and that is not sustainable. And that would mean the weakening of the member states and the centralization of power in Brussels. What we need is sovereign countries that are capable of protecting their citizens and their security. And it's only in that way will Europe be able to gain respect outside in the world and at home. That is the vision that we defend as Patriots for Europe.
Thank you very much, Vice President, Mr. Costa. You talked about the rule of law, violations, Gaza, Iran, Greenland, Venezuela, even Africa. What about Cyprus? Why didn't you mention Cyprus? Something else I'd like to say. It's not just geopolitical strategy and defense that we need. It's people, equal opportunities in education. Let me focus on something very serious, since we're talking about relations with other countries. We're talking about the excessive cost of studying abroad, especially in UK universities. This cannot be just considered collateral damage. Since in February, I will go with the Cultural Affairs or Education Committee to talk about the question of these university fees. The UK wants to continue reviewing its relations with the EU because it can't be a one-sided affair. It has to give something back. And a show of goodwill would be to reduce the fees for European citizens in UK universities.
Thank you, Ms. Zulmans, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Callas, Mr. Costa, dear colleagues. The Commission and Member States are negotiating on the future budget of the European Union, and what we're hearing is worrying. It's a matter of diluting European social policy through a vast programme together with agricultural and fisheries policy. There would no longer be the same obligations for Member States to use EU funds to invest in social matters and employment. For my political group, this is a no. We need to invest in access to quality education, health and employability. That's not optional. As Madam von der Leyen herself has committed to, the integrity of the European Social Fund must be preserved, and it should have an ambitious budget to face up to the challenges that we stand before. This is about Europe's future, its sovereignty, our values, and even our domestic and geopolitical security. Let us not let social distress and anger spin the wheels of the extreme right here in Europe. This is our responsibility.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tarziu, please.
Stimați colegi, să punem punctul.
Dear colleagues, let's dot the T here. Let's cross the T and dot the I. It's been decided that unity is no longer necessary when decisions are taken behind closed doors. Technically speaking, the EU has approved the allocation of funds to the total amount of 90 billion in support of Ukraine for the next 2 years. But in actual fact, a small number of countries, through a judicial artifice, has decided to suspend the right of other member states to decide on this highly sensitive file. It's no point in getting into details about accounting or policy. But one question needs to be answered. Are we a union of states, or have we already become a federation led by a political, ideological aristocracy? Unfortunately for the European taxpayers, what you've done was to substitute their right to be represented in decision-making. You have assumed responsibilities on their behalf, and those responsibilities will be divided up democratically. Does that make Europe stronger? No. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Scuderi, please. Unity and coherence. It's the only way that we can defend the European sovereignty and autonomy. Enough talking about submission to the U.S. We accepted tariffs. We accepted to buy U.S. gas, increasing military expenditure. Trump asks, we answer. And then we know that he is sparring with Putin in imperialism and the end of multilateralism. If we are united, democratic, based on rules, we are in the way. Therefore, they are pitting us against each other. But the attacks are also domestic from the hard right, Orban, Salvini, that are protecting Putin and assist Trump. And anyway, and they don't sanction Netanyahu and his genocide. And yet, people still say that the USA is our greatest ally. We have to come up with a serious answer. We need our autonomy in energy and elsewhere. Speeding up the transition, we must defend international rights, defense that is commune, but not a rearming that is for 27 member states. Federal Europe with leadership that assumes its responsibilities. Thank you.
Stoyanov.
Mr. Stoyanov, please.
Thank you, Madam President. The European Council's decision to grant 90 billion euros to Ukraine as a loan will have serious long-term financial implications. It means less money for key European policies and a greater burden on member states. But it is not merely a financial problem. It is an approach that leaves no room for active diplomacy and prolongs the conflict. When diplomacy is silent and weapons are allowed to speak, the result is human life lost. Enlargement, on the other hand, is a responsible long-term commitment. And when it is reduced to a mere political signal, its credibility is undermined. A real positive signal would be the forward-looking solution defending Europe's interest in the global stage. We insist on responding to the challenges by diplomacy, by acting upon our words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see Mr. Andrush, therefore I'll give the floor to Mr. Nemec.
Since the last Council meeting, the list of the brutal violations of the international order and law has grown significantly. Trump administration abducted Maduro, is seriously threatening Iranian regime, announcing an aggressive takeover of Greenland, while at the same time maintaining close relations and cooperation with the Zionist Prime Minister of Israel. The one that will go down in history as one of the most brutal leaders of our time, the one who continuously destroyed the international order and institutions such as United Nations, and they're all, how much more are we willing to tolerate? My message to the European leaders of tomorrow's extraordinary summit is the era of merely noting, condemning and urging leaders such as Trump, Netanyahu and Putin to respect international law and to act for something greater than own ego and greed is over. So, colleagues, stop condemning, start acting bolder, stronger and united. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moreno Sanchez, because I don't see Mr. Kelly in the chamber. Go ahead.
Thank you, President. Dear Vice President, President of the Council, dear Antonio, ladies and gentlemen, we're living through interesting times. More than ever, the EU must play a determining role on the geopolitical game board. We as Europeans must unite and morally encourage each other to defend the sovereignty of our Union, its essence and its existence in peace and democracy. Faced with attacks on international law, we should apply the same standard both in Ukraine, Gaza, Venezuela and Greenland. And here I want to express all our support for Greenland and Denmark. Trump has started a trade war. We should respond to that by suspending the trade agreement with the US and apply the anti-coercion instruments. At the same time, we need to strengthen relationships with partners with whom we share the same values and views of the world. Mercosur today constitutes the best response against the so-called Monroe Doctrine. We must strengthen our political independence. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Birka, please.
Szanowni Państwo,
Dear colleagues, the background for this debate is the appalling behavior of the European Commission. The Mercosur deal has been finalized by the Commission without respecting the procedures, treaties, without the participation of the European Parliament, in the atmosphere of a political blackmail. The dictatorial tendencies of Ms von der Leyen go to show that she doesn't care about legal procedures and the will and opinion of millions of our voters. There is no logical explanation for what has happened during the recent months. What was the European Commission motivated by? Why didn't you submit the deal to the European Parliament before signing it? Were you afraid it wouldn't pass? Are you not able to negotiate, or was there some behind-the-scenes pressure? Mercosur is not only about the downfall of our agriculture, it's not only about abandoning our food security, it's also the end of democracy and law, the rule of law in Europe. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. People are poor because of the Green Deal. We have aggressive illegal migrants. Our industry is being destroyed. Plus now the European Commission is dictatorial. If you want safe and sovereign Europe, you need to support tomorrow's motion of censure. The Parliament is being put to a test. It is an opportunity to do something our citizens will appreciate. The agriculture in Europe must stay. The industry must stay, but the Commission must go. Thank you.
I have a blue card for you. No? Okay. Honorable Tinkinen.
Mr. Tinkinen, please.
Dear President, imagine your daughter being arrested for not wearing a headscarf. Imagine your wife never returning from a protest and you being forced to search through body bags. Imagine the internet shutdown, losing contact with your son abroad and being left completely alone. If you step into the streets, you do not know whether others are still protesting in other cities or whether you are simply walking out to be killed. This is the daily reality for Iranians, while here they receive only lukewarm words of encouragement. And yet, they continue to march against our common enemy. They do not ask much of us. From our warm halls, only with decisions on paper we can help. Stronger sanctions, visa bans on the families of oppressors, trade embargoes, terrorist designation and invitation to hear their voice. Reza Pahlavi. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Zovko, please.
A time when the European Union is openly geopolitical approach to enlargement, credibility and consistency are essential. If the Union chooses to apply differentiated standards based on geopolitical realities, as is increasingly discussed in the context of Ukraine, then those same principles must be applied fairly and consistently to other candidate countries facing comparable security, political and historical challenges. Bosnia and Herzegovina is clearly one of those countries. It carries the legacy of war, operates within a fragile constitutional and security framework, and remains exposed to persistent internal and external destabilizing pressures. While it is largely passing under the radar that Bosnia and Herzegovina is heading into new elections without electoral law that reflects the spirit of the Dayton Peace Agreement, the European Union is competing to offer its services elsewhere. Even Wolfgang Petritsch, who bears responsibility for damage done to the Dayton Peace Agreement, recently stated, and I quote, "I would say now that the Croats need a third entity," unquote. The European Union cannot play a credible role in global peacemaking while a core peace agreement in its own neighbourhood remains politically fragile and unresolved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Soturi, please. Sanctions against the International Criminal Court, against our partners in civil society, our judges, our former commissioners, bombing, kidnapping of a dictator, support to genocide, bartering for a Nobel Peace Prize, and of international humanitarian aid, scorn for international law, a trade war. This is a summary, then, of 1 year of the 47th U.S. President's foreign policy. The international rules-based order is at the edge of the abyss. And what is Europe doing? It is hesitating. It is time to wake up. It is now or never. The European promise is in our hands. Let us activate the Bloc Institute as well as the anti-coercion instrument in the UN, in civil society, and to Democrats in the world. Let us build the alliances for democracy and support for international law. Each member state has much to lose here. Let us protect ourselves against the U.S. of today. Ms. Galán, please.
We have entered into an era of global disorder. Respect for international law and national sovereignty is a path that we have suffered in the past. We should learn from what happened in Europe with the Nazis in the past. We know how this chapter in history was closed. Today, the fascism has new faces, but the same and old dangerous forms. As Trump is threatening to invade Greenland. He puts his tariffs as blackmail. He is killing people, and he has conducted an illegal intervention in Venezuela, and the EU is complicit. Ms. Callas, your role is horrific. We, the Europeans, we do not want to be vassals of Trump's United States. Europe needs to take immediate measures. We need to suspend the trade agreement with the US. We need to activate the anti-coercion instrument. We need to stop using the dollar as a reference currency. We need to commit to multilateralism. Trump is not a reliable partner. He is Europe's largest enemy. Get out of your offices, move beyond your weak statements and do something now.
Sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin,
Madam Chair, the EU and its allies have been inciting people to all sorts of things for years, and at last people have realized that words are not deeds. Donald Trump is now using a different language to the one that we have used, different to our elites. He is honest in what he says, honest with his voters. We just heard from Manu, who said we have laughed at Donald Trump's incompetence for a long time. And I'm saying, how can you show such disrespect to the President of the United States? If you do so, how can you be surprised that the United States doesn't want anything to do with our EU coalition anymore? So now we have to look at how we behave with Donald Trump and together with him in the Atlantic Alliance. I think that the times of a left-wing liberal politics is past. At long last, we need as Europe to have a foreign policy which can work for us all. We need to create new principles and we need to orient ourselves to a new reality. Thank you very much. Now let's go on to catch the eye. So we're going to have to go through this very quickly. I can't take on all requests. Brezhnev is the next.
Commissioner, the conclusions of the European Council show that the European Union is in a time of heightened geopolitical tensions and important decisions which will decide on our competitiveness. In this context, the discussions on the new budget is strategic because it must be able to respond quickly and it must enable quick economic development. We live in a new world and therefore we need to act. We need to invest in what heightens our competition: industry, innovation, energetic security and regional development. A Europe which wants to be politically relevant needs to be economically strong.
Mr. López Aguilar.
Grazie, Presidente. Presidente Costa, High Rep Kaja Kallas, ¿es que Europa no puede?
Thank you. Can Europe not respond to Trump's threats and blackmail, or do we not want to? We have instruments. We can suspend the agreement that was signed in Scotland. We can also took up the 2023 anti-coercion regulation. We can also use the Article 42(7) in the treaties because we're under threat. We cannot come into Viktor Orbán, Robert Fico, and other people. We're here talking about our actual credibility on the world stage. And we have a bazooka we can use, but we need to make sure that we maintain our standards and stand up to this techno-oligarchy. Because if these things won't work with Trump, well, no omnibus will be useful either. And we are here to represent the European people. We must defend them. Thank you.
We often say that we don't have the means for our ambition. I would say that in these cases we don't have the ambition to use our means. Because when it comes to trade and digital matters, we can be powerful and we can be effective, but we really have to want it. Since the last July in Scotland, the appeasement approach pursued by the Commission with the support, we know, of several EU governments has blatantly failed. Because as the old saying goes, if you behave like a sheep, the wolf will eat you. So let's be bold. Trump wants to subdue us. Let's respond by using all our trade powers, as many colleagues have said, but I want to say it, dear President of the Council, dear Antonio, let's respond also by reforming the EU governance. In this Parliament in October, we have adopted a very bold document to make the Union more powerful, more effective and more democratic. It is high time that the Council started to tackle the institutional issues. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Thank you very much. Now we have Van Laschut.
Thank you. The old world is dying and a new world struggles to be born. Now is the time of monsters. This quote from an Italian philosopher about changing times is very fitting. To navigate these times, Europe doesn't have to be a monster or a victim. All we have to do is unite. Unite and take responsibility to bring about a new and better world order, together with partners like Canada and Japan and partners in South America and Africa, with a more powerful United Nations with balanced representation. If we want to not only defeat Putin's and Trump's imperialism, but also create a better new world, we need to stop being afraid and start believing in our own strength, the strength of unity. So, High Representative Kallas and President Costa, don't only react to the events of this week. Proactively shape the coming decades and build a union on foundations that will last for another century. A United States of Europe now. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole Oliveria. Thank you, Oliveria.
Obrigado, Presidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Costa, the conclusions of the recent Council meeting was only a month ago, but seems an eternity ago now. These are conclusions from a meeting which is not linked to the reality that people are living in Europe. We continue to see that issues related to housing, access to health, etc., problems with people's living conditions. Nothing is being discussed. Nothing is being treated as an urgent issue for the European Council. You're just not addressing social issues. Conversely, we see Mercosur, we see warmongering, we see competitiveness policy, everything which is pushing towards more and more measures to support multinationals and economic powers, to the detriment of SMEs, to the detriment of the production capacities of national countries. Once again, we're seeing obstacles to a peaceful conclusion to the war in Ukraine, and the EU has insisted on prolonging with 90 billion to prolong the war. This is the wrong direction.
Sorel.
L'Union européenne a une voix singulière à porter.
The EU has a particular voice to express itself on the international stage, and we're too often fearful, submissive. But here we have an amazing window of opportunity. President Costa, Emmanuel Macron is right when he refuses the invitation of Donald Trump to join his peace board when he has scorned the UN and violated international law. I think that it's important to say that France opposed the invasion of Iraq, which destabilized the whole of the Middle East. And we were right. The Commission President has to decide what our fate is going to be. We are in this House together, so we are also involved. If the United States purchases or conquers Greenland, we are involved. What we are going to be seeing is an Anschluss, and we have to re-find our place in history. We have to re-find our consistency, our power, and also we have to look at the countries of the South.
We speak today of an independent Europe. For that, we need the European Defence Union, and we need to strengthen our economy. For both things, we need access to critical raw materials. And we cannot achieve that if we do not conclude the Mercosur agreement. And we are going to decide on that in a few minutes. Of course, we also need to decrease the dependence of Europe on foreign trade and strengthen our internal market. We need to implement our measures more faster. And in the past, we have been focusing on climate objectives. This is not sustainable anymore. Our energy policy needs to be, of course, green, but in the focus we need geopolitical objectives, we need to strengthen our competitiveness, and we need to achieve geostrategic autonomy.
Grattini.
Doamna președintă, domnule președinte Costa.
Madam President, Madam Commissioner, President Costa, we are going through historical times, extraordinary times, and I was listening to what the Prime Minister of Canada says. It seems that the world order is now world disorder. The EU needs power. I've been listening to you, Mr. President, and you said, amongst other things, that the European Union needs to show its citizens that it cares about economic prosperity, about economic growth, innovation, wages, accessible, affordable housing, etc. But we need to do this, and for this we need a stronger economy. We need solidarity, stronger solidarity. And we need to not manipulate citizens, to acknowledge the truth and tell them what we're doing here, every measure, every step. Otherwise, we'll destroy European unity, which we need so dearly now. So we need to tell the truth and fight for our citizens and their rights. Thank you.
Van der Ballen, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam Commissioner, dear President Costa. In the words of California Governor Gavin Newsom, it's time to buck up and have a backbone. And growing a backbone will take more than words, even though I do appreciate President von der Leyen saying yesterday in Davos, nostalgia will not bring back the old order. And that's why I would like to remind you and all of us in this House that the United States is currently threatening Europe of getting rid of the visa-free travel to the US if we don't give them free access to our biometric police databases. And why on earth is the Commission going along with this? And why did the Member States approve a mandate to negotiate with the US on this in December when we could all see the direction that things were taking? The Commission must put all negotiations on this matter on hold. We will not be blackmailed. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole Boslager.
Thank you, Ms. Budlager.
Dear Mr. Costa,
Yes.
Dear Mr. Costa, this is the House of European citizens, and the European citizens I talk to are pissed. They're very, very angry. They're angry at Trump for attacking Europe. They're proud of Europe. They like our culture. They like our values. But they're also very, very disappointed with the 27 national leaders. So the one message that I have from European citizens to your club of 27 national leaders is do the right thing and abolish yourself. Understand that there is no one with the format and the leadership to bring Europe forward in these difficult times in this new world order. So there's one task that you have on Thursday, which is abolish yourself and make sure we have a united European foreign policy, a United States of Europe that is able to act and lead in these times. Thank you.
Diamo ora la parola.
Now, on behalf of the Commission, we give the floor back to Ms. Kallas.
President, honourable members, it is somewhat unusual that we are briefing Parliament of the outcomes of the European Council that happened in December, when tomorrow we have again a meeting of heads of state and government, because this shows the reality of the times that we are in. When European leaders met in December, the stakes were high, but Europe managed to secure Ukraine's funding needs for 26 and 27. We felt that we reached a degree of stability and we were ready to turn a page and begin a new year. Barely a month later, we find ourselves confronted with new challenges and increasingly volatile global context. Once again, wherever we look, crises are accumulating. Russia's brutal war against Ukraine is showing no sign of abating. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains dire. Iran killed thousands of protesters. The multilateral order is fraying under pressure. And Europe's sovereignty, our freedom to decide our own future, is increasingly being tested. We face complex, interconnected challenges in every direction. As many of you said during this debate, we must preserve a sense of urgency and redouble our efforts to strengthen our political unity. In a time when there is a weaponization of everything, we must ensure that European Union security, from hybrid threats to economic security, from cyber attacks to critical raw materials, is there. Allow me to briefly summarise key points. First, Europe must develop a strong and credible defence posture. Russia's continued military build-up is not theoretical, it is real. It is ongoing and it directly threatens European security. The role of the European Parliament as a co-legislator is essential to swiftly adopt the programmes and legislation needed to advance our defence readiness. It requires speed, scale and political will. Security underpins everything we value. Without it, there can be no education, healthcare or infrastructure. From my time as Prime Minister, I know how hard budget talks can be, but investing in defence is essential to protecting what really matters. So we will continue to rely on your support on defence-related funding and for the CFCP budget in the negotiations in the next multiannual financial framework. Second, we must continue to place the interests of European citizens at the very heart of our actions. Uncertainty has become a daily reality for many people. Economic insecurity combined with the polluted social media networks creates fertile ground for destabilisation. We must strengthen Europe's competitiveness and build partnerships with countries that share our interests and concerns on economic security. Expanding our trade ties and diversifying supply chains is the best way forward to ensure that the European Union economy can grow and we can deliver for our citizens. We stand for more trade, not for more trade barriers. And third, we must treat foreign interference as a top political priority and recognise the urgent need for greater ambition and resources to fight back. We need to counter false narratives that target Europe more decisively. And we also must tell our own story better, the story of what Europe delivers, values it stands for and protects at home and around the world. And fourth, despite disagreements, the fundamental principle stands. The partners stick together. We will maintain pragmatic engagement and uphold strong, balanced transatlantic partnership. In every alliance, there are moments of open disagreement, but Europe will not junk 80 years of transatlantic relations. At the same time, we will defend our interests and values whenever necessary. Decisions about Europe are taken in Europe. This applies to our security, our way of life and social model, our freedoms and prosperity, our regulatory autonomy and our commitment to human rights and the rules-based international order. Honourable members, beyond today's turbulence, the coming year will be decisive for strengthening Europe's unity, both internally as well as externally. Our credibility abroad depends on our consistency at home. I trust that this Parliament will continue playing a crucial role for shaping Europe's strength. Thank you very much.
Grazie, grazie molto.
Thank you very much. Now we should like to give the floor back to Mr. Costa. Thank you.
Representative Dear Callas, honourable members, we are living challenging times. We need to tackle the unfair trade competition from China. We need to face Russian threat to our security and ensure a just and lasting peace in Ukraine. And at the same time, the transatlantic alliance is being questioned. A threat we don't want to speculate or escalate. We want to communicate with our United States partners. But we must be clear, a threat to the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of our member states is simple and unacceptable. And one thing is certain, Europe will not give into coercion. The European Union will not give into coercion. And the European Union has the necessary instruments to defend itself effectively if need be. To face all the challenges, we need a more sovereign Europe, firm on principles, strong on protection, and determined on prosperity. United with a long-term budget fit for purpose, effective on our digital regulatory independence, autonomous on energy, and strong and confident in the global market, ensuring access to critical raw materials and opening markets to our exports. And of course, with more efficient European institutions. Il faut être clair.
We have to be clear. Ms. Aubry said that the Mercosur agreement is not going to solve all of our problems. That's very true. However, the Mercosur agreement is nonetheless vital if we want to see a Europe which is more sovereign. Now, the reason for that is that everything that is imported needs to respect our phytosanitary standards and also food safety standards. Now, with this agreement, we will strengthen standards, environmental standards and social standards in Mercosur countries. This agreement protects us even more, and it does not undermine or weaken our standards. Mr. Bardella said we will see thousands of tons being imported. We already see that, but what he does not say is that in the Mercosur agreement, many agricultural products are subject to quotas. When we talk of beef, for example, do you know what the quota is for beef? 1.5% of our European production of beef. When we talk about poultry, the quota is 1.3% of our production of poultry. When we talk about sugar, the quota is below what we already import from Mercosur countries. So we should not hide these facts if we want to have a debate which respects the intelligence of the people of Europe. We also need to listen to the farmers. We need to listen to the farmers. And we have listened to them. That's why we introduced quotas, that's why we have safeguard clauses, we strengthened support for our farmers, we've created a mirror clause, we have done all of that. We have guaranteed protection for 63 geographic indications in France, over 50 in Italy. The facts are as follows. The tariffs are between 27 and 55%, and these tariffs will be removed for allow us to grow our exports to Mercosur countries. We also need to listen to the others. We need to listen to the workers in the automobile industry. Our cars produced in Europe, now have to face tariffs of 35% when we want to export to Mercosur. Workers in these areas and other industrial areas face very high tariffs. And if we want to ensure our sovereignty, that we need to have a strong economy, an economy which can support our sovereignty. Today, we commemorate the 40th anniversary of the accession of Spain and Portugal to Europe. These two member states share a history, share a culture, and have shared language with 4 countries of Mercosur. Now, what we're celebrating today is a victory of democracy over decades of dictatorship in the Iberian Peninsula. What we're celebrating today is development attacking poverty, and we're celebrating an openness to the world against the isolation of the former Iberian dictatorships. What we're celebrating today is not just the success of Portugal and Spain. What we're celebrating is the success of Europe. In celebrating this 40th anniversary, we once again reaffirm our commitment to those who look to a future accession to the European Union. We're celebrating our commitment to Ukraine, to Moldova, and the countries of Western Balkans. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Grazie molte.
Thank you very much. The discussion has come to an end. The sitting is suspended just for a few minutes because we are coming on to celebrating the anniversary of the accession of Spain and Portugal to the European Union.